This policy of escalation has been tried twice before in the last year, and it was a dismal failure each time, and yet the president is saying he's going to try it again. There is no military solution to the quagmire in Iraq. Let me say that again. There is no military solution to the quagmire in Iraq. And yet that seems to be the only thing that this president can think of doing. What was completely absent from the president's speech last night were any references, zero references, he had to diplomacy or to political engagement with the factions in Iraq or with her neighbors, as the Baker-Hamilton Commission had recommended, to engage with Iran, with Syria, and with the other neighbors. This president seems to have never heard of those words, diplomacy and negotiation. So why don't we say them together, and maybe the president will remember that those words exist. Diplomacy and negotiation. Diplomacy saves lives. This president needs to be reminded of that. Now, he made a token reference to one other way besides military power to relate to the situation, and that was to economic engagement, economic aid. But it was totally token, and the truth is that America has already wasted tens of billions of our tax dollars on a colonial-style economic domination in Iraq. The only people who have benefited so far from our aid, tens of billions of dollars so far, again, are the corporate executives at Halliburton, Bechtel, and the rest of them. Those are the only people benefiting. And third, I'm reminded of the escalations in a previous quagmire in our history, the one in Vietnam. By 1969, the majority of the American people had turned against the war in Vietnam, a policy that was rotten to the core from the start, just like our policy in Iraq has been rotten to the core from the start. It's a policy that is based on lies and deceptions and militarism. But President Nixon, at the time our President Nixon kept escalating, and he used, interestingly, the exact same rationale as President Bush. We need to escalate so we can de-escalate. The logic of that reminds me of that famous book, 1984, that war is peace. The illogic of these leaders, so-called leaders, just gets past me. President Nixon's escalations, starting in 1969 and continuing, did not lead to de-escalation or peace. They only led to the same thing that this escalation is going to lead to, which is the killing of more U.S. troops and more innocent victims in a faraway land, civilian victims. We lost 58,000 American troops and 2 million Southeast Asians because of that wrong-headed and immoral and illegal policy, and we're going to say no to it this time. Now, back in that quagmire in Iraq, they used the same scare tactics that President Bush was using last night. If we leave, things are going to be even worse. Heard it before, haven't we?
They're getting worse.
Some of you are old enough like I am, though I'm very glad to see quite a few young people here. Hallelujah. Welcome. We're glad you're here. Some of you are old enough, though, to remember the rationales given for staying in Vietnam and for escalating in Vietnam, because if we left, we were told, there was going to be a bloodbath in Vietnam, and the dominoes of communist domination were going to fall all the way across Southeast Asia. None of that happened. None of that happened. Instead, Vietnam resolved its own civil war, just like Iraq is going to have to resolve its own civil war. And Vietnam, in fact, is now a stable and increasingly prosperous country with whom we again have normal diplomatic relations. So withdrawing from Vietnam didn't lead to all the horror stories and the fear-mongering that they were talking about. Instead, it led to the only sensible thing, which was for Vietnam to resolve its own problems, just like Iraq must do.
Self-determination.
Now, the last thing I want to say before calling on some of our other speakers is that I'm grateful that thoughtful people from both political parties are already speaking out against this escalation. Just a few of the prominent Republican senators that I want to mention, and the first one to come out was Senator Gordon Smith of Oregon, Senator Norm Coleman, Republican of Minnesota, and Senator Chuck Hagel. I just want to read you a quote from that last one, Senator Chuck Hagel of Nebraska. And this is a quote that he has in this morning's New York Times. Quote, "This is a dangerously wrong-headed strategy that will drive America deeper into an unwinnable swamp at great cost." Senator Chuck Hagel. Over 2/3 of the American people oppose this escalation. Less than 1/5 of the American people are supporting it. It's time for this president to learn that democracy means you need to respond and be responsive to the will of the people.
Right. Yeah.
But we need to do more, and our elected leaders in Congress need to do more than simply speak out or take a symbolic vote against this policy, which is what they're talking about right now. Simply a symbolic vote with no teeth in it. We must demand that our members of Congress use their constitutional power of the purse and withhold funding for this escalation.
That's right.
And they must use their legal authority to restrict troop levels. In history, 14 times legislation has been passed doing exactly those things. I don't know where Senator Biden is getting his information from. The Constitution is so very clear on these issues. There is a balance of power. There are checks and balances in our system. The Congress, and this is so crystal clear in our Constitution, is the only part of our constitutional system of government that has the power to declare war, and it is the only arm of government that can allocate funds. Use that power. We need to tell Congress, use that power to stop this war. Perhaps the most prominent of those 14 times that I just referred to, when legislation has been passed and signed into law to either stop funding or to limit troop deployment, perhaps the most prominent of those was June of 1973 with the famous bill that finally led to the beginning of the end of the Vietnam War. It said that after August of 1974, not $1 could still be spent on fighting and deploying U.S. troops in Southeast Asia. That's what we need to do now. We need to cut off the funds.
Yeah. Stop the funding.